The five-time world champion Vishhy Anand is in good spirits as he takes on the two-time world championship challenger, recently the winner of two candidates tournaments, Jan Nepomniachtchi. It's going to be a clash of generations as well as a clash between two top players in the world of chess. Jan gets his pieces ready. Vishhy is all ready for the battle. It's at the Levitov Chess Week 2023 happening in Amsterdam. We are all set to go. And there we are. Handshake, 10 minutes plus 5 seconds increment. And Nepo opens the game with 1d4. Now Vishhy brings his knight out to f6, taking the center further with c4. Knight to c3. Will Anand go for the Nimzo? No, he chooses the very solid Queen's Gambit declined. And you can see there Nepo thinking of his different options. He takes, pawn takes, and bishop to g5. This is a very popular way to play against the QGD, which is known as the Carlsbad structure for white. Vishhy brings his bishop out to e7, and Nepo now has a few options. The main one is of course to put his bishop on d3, and he does that. Bishop d3 on the board. Vishhy pushes the bishop to a with h6, and you can see that Nepo looking on the other side, trying to recollect his theory. Bishop h4 played, and now Anand can go knight d7. That is one idea in this position. He can also castle, but generally black doesn't castle so soon, but he does it. The reason I thought was that now white can go queen c2, long castle, and try to attack on the king side with h3 g4. Well, but Anand has something other on his mind. He goes knight h5, offering a trade of the bishops. Queen takes, and Nepo quickly castles on the king side. He doesn't think about queen side castling there. Okay, now a very simple plan that white would have in this position is to somehow defend this pawn and engineer the f3 e4 breakthrough. Meanwhile, black will try to meet f3 with the move c5. That's a very common knee-jerk reaction. And also Anand continues developing. He puts his knight on d7. Generally, in such structures, rook b1, b4, b5 is also played. It's called the minority attack. But Nepo goes for completely different plan. He is like, I have not developed my queen, which generally belongs on c2. So I'm going to put it on d2 and defend the pawn on e3 so that I can play f3 next. That seems to be his plan. Here, Anand brings back his knight in good position on f6. And one thing you will see in this game quite a lot is how Vishhy reshuffles his pieces to their good squares. Nepo goes f3, and his idea is e4. If you go rook e8 trying to attack the e3 pawn, most likely he will play e4. Here Anand now has to be careful because not only is e4 an idea, but also g4, knight g3, and trying to gain space on the king side. So he instantly meets it with a strike in the center with c5. And as we said, c5 is a knee-jerk reaction to the f3 move in such structures. But one thing that is a bit troublesome for Anand is his bishop on c8. It's not developed yet, and the pawn on d5 could become weak. How does Nepo continue here? You can see him thinking, and he is maybe planning. Ooh, he brings his rook. I was wondering if he wants to already start expanding with g4 and start pushing his pawns. He goes rook e1, centralizes his rook, and now Vishhy needs to decide what to do next. You can move your knight away to b6. That's one plan. Anand goes rook d8. And interesting move because with the rook, he's defending his d5 pawn. But then where do you put your knight? He wants to go to f8. Wow. And then move his bishop. That seems like the plan. g4 played, and let's see what Vishhy comes up with. Nepo's position does look more flexible, easier to play for the time being. Knight jumps to f8. A good square for the knight, and look at how Nepo brings his knight to g3. But one more thing that the knight on f8 is doing is not just protecting the king, but also going to e6 to hit d4. And there you have. The knight comes to e6. But with that, he's once again shut down this bishop. This knight is actually not helping the bishop's cause in many ways. And now white can actually jump with his knight on f5 and place it there. Yes, he puts his knight on f5 on a very good square, attacking the queen. The queen moves to c7. And now, how does Nepo continue his attack? Because now his pawn is well defended. Also, it's impossible to kick the knight because then you lose the h6 pawn. So, a lot of problems there for Vishhy. Bishop b1 played a nice little move. The bishop moves away. Who knows? The queen and bishop can create a battery down this diagonal. For Vishhy now, it's also tough to actually figure out what moves need to be played. One of them could be to take on d4, pawn takes, and make use of this f4 square. That could be an idea, quite possible, but it opens up the e file for the rook and the knight, and that's not something that Anand wants to do. You can see Vishhy calmly surveying the position and trying to see what are his possible options. Time wise, Nepo has close to 7 minutes on the clock. What will Vishhy do next? And you can already sense from the body language that Nepo is feeling confident here. Vishhy is not really feeling completely safe about his position. And this is where experience comes in. Sometimes you can't find moves, and inexperienced players want to lash out. They want to sort of do something in the position. But Vishhy has years of experience on his side, and he would like actually to keep improving his position minimally. And one of the things that he must figure out is what to do with this bishop and the rook, and that's the reason why he plays bishop d7. Now this might seem a nothing move for the time being, but on the other hand, it does connect the rooks. Nepo needs to plan. How does he attack? He goes king h1, so logical. He plays his rook to g1, pushes his pawn to f4, and then his pawn to g5. And guys, that would be a monstrous attack coming Vishhy Anand's way. So Anand plays bishop c6. Once again, this is purely on feel. If you put your bishop here opposite the king, it will come in handy at some point, is what Vishhy is thinking, because now Nepo can never take on c5. He has to maintain the pawn on d4 so that black cannot push his pawn down the board. But Nepo has no such ideas of taking on c5. He says, I'm anyway planning a kingside attack. He goes h4 there. And now Vishhy, another improving move, taking the e-file. So this is again a very calm, cool, collected move. He puts his rook on e8. Now there's no problems on the e7 square. And Anand can already think about taking on d4 and putting his knight on f4. He does that. C takes d4, e takes d4. And now you want to put your piece, one of your pieces on this square. Maybe queen f4 also logical. Very interesting. But then the queen is a little misplaced on this square. That's what one gets the feeling. So Anand puts his knight there, which is very, very good. Now the problem is for white that already there are some exchanges happening down the e-file. So you cannot just go g5. Queen h2 played and Nepo pinned this knight this way. But now Vishhy very quickly exchanges a rook. Rook takes, and well, I think it's very likely he'll get his other rook on e8. He's just thinking, just hesitating a bit there. But I think that is the logical move, to bring your other rook to e8. And once the rooks are traded off the board, then Nepo's attack may not really be so threatening, because then you're only left with minor pieces. Now, Jan Nepomniachtchi has a decision. Trade the rooks, give up on the attack, or play rook g1, keeping the rooks but giving Vishhy the all-important e-file in the position. Well, he goes rook g1. This is taking a lot of risks, and now Vishhy can actually play bishop d7, hit this knight, or even h5, which is a classy move in that position. He goes knight e6, and that is slightly passive because he wants to trade off the queens, but it's also practical. Anand is like, let's trade the queens so that the attack no longer goes through. Knight takes c7, and now Nepo, attacking chances are gone. He's shaking his head there, but the endgame is still not so simple, because here the bishop is a little bit restricted by the pawn. The d5 pawn is under pressure. Also g5 is in the air. But Vishhy is a master at defending such positions. He goes knight e6, and maybe now somewhere he is angling for g6. Let's see what Nepo does. He goes rook to d1. He defends his pawn here so that the knight can start moving. And Anand brings his king into the game. A very, very useful move. In this game, Vishhy has played several such moves where he has just minutely improved his position. Nepo also doing the same, bringing the king up to g3. And now actually g6 could be an idea, because let's say g6, you take the pawn here, king g7, the knight is kind of sidelined there. But Vishhy goes knight g8. Very, very interesting. He defends the pawn, wants to kick the knight away, and then maybe bring his knight to e7. That could also be a plan. But Jan Nepomniachtchi there seems to have a plan to clamp down the king side structure, and that happens very often with the move h5. That's exactly what he's done. He's clamped down Vishy's king side position. Knight comes back to f6. He didn't actually trade the knights with knight e7. He comes back to f6. Now bishop comes to c2. And maybe the bishop wants to pop out on b3. Anand goes rook to c8. And Nepo does put his bishop on b3, attacking the d5 pawn. It's attacked twice already. And if one more piece comes here, it will be attacked thrice. So Anand goes back to d8. Knight e3 has come in the position. Vishhy says it's time to get some space back. He plays his pawn up to g6. And with this, if Nepo doesn't do anything, then he's losing a pawn on h5. So he has to make a move. But what exactly is it? He takes, pawn takes, and Anand has reclaimed some of his space. Next, he can bring his king up. Also g5 to clamp down on the f4 square, and h5 to create a passer. So these are some of the ideas that Vishhy is playing with. Nepo now goes f4. He's still trying to push here. He's still trying to fight for an advantage. But I think a move like g5 would be very strong. But Anand makes an error. He goes king g7 and f5 played, attacking the knight on e6. Vishhy goes knight to g5 and now takes the pawn on g6. Believe it or not, this king is in some trouble because the knight is jumping here. The bishop is coming back with a check. And you have to be careful. He takes king takes g6, bishop c2 check. You would love to bring your knight in here, but no. Vishhy actually goes king f7 back. He doesn't want to trade those knights. And now Nepo goes knight f5. Look at this. White's position suddenly starting to get better. Amazing knight attacking h6 pawn. You could play h5 here, but no, he goes here rook h8. Rook e1. The rook now threatens to enter with rook e7. So many problems in this position. How is Vishhy going to come out of this situation? He goes h5, but it's a mistake. The beautiful move now is rook e5 with the idea of knight d6 and winning this knight here. It's not an easy move to find, but can Nepo play it? No, he takes on h5 and the position is back to equal. Vishhy is now okay, but he was in big trouble. And you can see there, he's a bit nervous, he's a bit tensed. Nepo, as always, plays fast, he looks confident. Knight takes h5, king comes up to g4, attacking both the knights. Knight comes to e6. Vishhy is now wanting to give the check with his other knight. And what does Nepo do next now? His king could also come under some pressure. The only problem that black faces is his bishop is so passive. It's doing absolutely nothing. Now a check to the king. And Vishhy can move his king to e7. He has to, otherwise he might lose this knight. Okay, he can also go to f6. Where is he planning to go? Also, Nepo really would like to sort of fight for the advantage and not accept that this position is equal and drawish. King e7, but there's nothing much to play for. He goes bishop f5 and he attacks the pinned piece here. But now Vishhy can actually bring his knight back, defend it, and also attack the bishop. That's what he does. So now Anand's position, very solid. The knight is hanging on d6, so he's threatening to take it. Clearly the knight doesn't have too many squares to go to, so he goes knight to b5. And now what does Anand do? One plan is to take. King takes and then rook f8 check, kicking the king away, and then black is out of the woods. So he takes, king takes and plays check. Nepo should be very careful. He should move his king back to g4 where it will have a lot of space. Don't go to e5. It looks good. No, he goes there. But now the king is trapped. You can see the knight can jump here. You can see Vishhy is absolutely ready with his move. Knight f4. Knight g6 is a mate. Knight d3 is a mate. And look at Nepo there. He is talking to himself. He's so upset. And he instantly shoots out his move knight to d5 and smiles there because he is so unhappy there with what he has done. His position was completely fine, but he had to give up a piece in order to save his king from getting checkmated. Now rook g1. He's trying to play fast, but his position looks bad. Will Vishhy manage to win this? The only problem that one can feel in this position is the number of pawns are less. White king is active. White knight is attacking here and white rook is ready to enter. So still, practically, there are some things to be done. a6 played by Anand. He brings his knight to d6. Also, Yan is making his moves pretty quickly and he's putting a lot of pressure on Vishhy. You can see Vishy's hand shaking a bit there. King d7, rook to g7 check. King comes up to c6. And he goes back to g3. One important line that should be mentioned is knight takes b7 is met with knight d3 mate, because now the bishop is defended. So that's the reason why he goes to g3. Anand quickly chops off the pawn. Pawn comes to b3. And now bishop b1 played. Rook to c3 check. King b6 played by Vishhy. 2 pawns each aside. But Anand has an extra piece. Now a check on c8. And Vishhy goes king to a5. He's slowly figuring out the plan here, which is to move his king to b4, win the pawn, and then start chugging these pawns down the board. Knight d6, pawn to b5. You can see there Vishhy also gaining in confidence there that he's going to convert this position. Often when you see Vishhy converting winning positions, you might see him a bit shaky with the way he makes his moves, but actually he's very solid with the moves that he's making here. He gives a check. Rook comes to a8, defending the pawn on a6. And now the idea, of course, is to come king b4, take the pawn, and start pushing his pawns down the board. King to d7. Nepo is trying to bring his king from the backside, but Anand's king is way quicker. He goes king b4, king to c7 played, and now Vishhy takes one of the pawns. Nepo will get back one of his pawns as well with king b7, because now the a6 pawn cannot be defended. But I think Vishhy can actually, he goes rook h8, can now calmly use his b pawn to push it. Yes, he goes b4. One pawn is good enough there. Nepo now clearly having no real plans. He should be in big trouble here, because also the d pawn is not going anywhere. He goes rook a1, attacking the bishop. Anand moves his king in to defend the bishop and also free one space for the pawn to come down. Rook a5 played, and he plays pawn to b3. Rook g5 played by Nepo, and now the knight comes back. Vishhy is planning to put his knight to block any side checks, perhaps from here. King up. Rook pins the knight. Ooh, nice move there. King comes here. Knight check. And now king comes to d5. Knight f4 check. The king is being moved around. King to c6. But now that the knight is pinned, I think all that is needed is, yes, the bishop comes out. Next, the king comes out, and then the pawn pushes forward. Rook to g4, and Vishhy is now, ooh, he's going to move his king. Yes, he does. And Nepo resigns with a very gentlemanly smile on his face. Very nice there by both the players. Nepo seemed to be doing quite well in the opening and early middle game, but Vishy's defense was quite amazing. At some point, Nepo also had a chance to win the game, but Anand, when he got his chance, he simply pounced onto it, and Nepo's king was not at all safe in the center. It's very nice to see how both the players are analyzing. Nepo, of course, has great respect for Vishhy Anand. He's mentioned that after he won one of the candidates' tournaments, and there the match has come to an end. The game has come to an end in Vishy's favor.